Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. When should a man move out of his parents' house? Well, that's a question we're going to examine today because let's be honest, too many men today are living with their parents still. They're the basement dwellers, the night walkers, the men who never see the sun because they're playing video games, ordering DoorDash, and eating frozen pizza. So what we want to do is encourage men to examine the reason why they're living with their parents, because living with your parents isn't a problem until it is. So Andrew, one of the stats that we discovered while prepping for today's episode was that 60% of men aged 18 to 24 still living at home with their parents.
And for men aged 25 to 34, 20% of them are still living at home.
So we've created arguably the most comfortable generation who's largely dependent and really not independent at all.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes back to that Tucker Carlson quote that I used, I don't know, a while ago now. But men often won't do something until they have to do something. And I think with this generation, a large part of what we see is that guys don't necessarily need to go somewhere in life. They don't need to move out, and so they don't.
Historically, when men lived with their parents well into their late 20s, into their 30s, people viewed that as something is wrong here. Why are you not living on your own, or why have you not purchased your own home yet? But today, people look at that as very normal. It is common now for men to be living with their parents throughout their 20s and now even 30s.
It is very concerning. And there was a point in time where this thing we used to call a beer belly was something that we noticed and generally understood to be problematic. Now our health is so poor and it's so widespread that we don't even bat an eye anymore. And I think it's that same thing. We have all acclimated to something, and we now all consider something normal or acceptable that was never meant to be that way.
Now, obviously, there are a variety of reasons why men remain at home living with their parents, and we're not going to examine every reason today. We're going to look at three. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the financial reason that men stay at home. Now, there are a lot of benefits to staying at home when you think about the cost savings of not paying for rent. When you think about the cost savings of not buying groceries, the cost savings of not paying for utilities, there's a lot of benefit for a man to stay at home living with his parents.
It is easy to hide behind the reasoning of financial stewardship, and a lot of guys do that. But that is actually part of the problem. Taking on responsibility, paying your own bills, paying your way through life on some level is a really important part of a guy growing up and moving out.
One of the challenges that I think men face is this assumption that life is very expensive. Now, it is expensive.
Sure.
For certain. Prices have continued to go up steadily. I read a stat recently that said that housing costs are up 180% from 1980. So things are much more expensive than they were 45 years ago, but they're not as expensive as men tend to think. And a recent survey was done among, boomers and then millennials and Gen Z, asking the question, what is the minimum amount of money you need to make in a year to consider yourself financially successful? And so boomers listed, $100,000 a year. Millennials listed $180,000 a year. And then Gen Z listed, I think it was like $545,000 or $560,000 a year.
Which is crazy.
Insane, yeah. Over $500,000 Gen Z listed. They're so disconnected from reality. They're so disconnected from the cost of life. And so if you spend a lot of your time just on the internet, just in social media, you're going to draw the conclusion that you can't afford to do anything, when in reality, you actually can.
And guys need to understand that financial responsibility is not just a lack of expenses. It's not just how much money is in the savings account, how much money is invested. Those are all important things to measure. It's more about lifestyle and spending habits.
Yeah.
So when a guy is becoming financially responsible, to use the excuse, I'm just going to live at home to not have expenses, that's actually not building good financial habits at all. You're just delaying or offsetting, you're just pushing that down the road. But when a guy engages with finances, when he has things to pay, when he's got a lifestyle to sustain, that is actually what creates those. That's what the decisions are. Do I buy this? Do I not buy this? Do I go here? Do I not? Do I spend this money? Do I not? That is actually where the financial skill set comes in.
I don't think a lot of men know how to put together a budget and then stick to a budget, because we live in a day and age where that's not really necessary for a lot of people. They just kind of live paycheck to paycheck, and they just swipe the card or do digital transactions. So they're not aware of the cash in, cash out. They're not following the Dave Ramsey envelope principle. And while not everyone will have to go to that extreme, it's actually really important for men to learn to budget, to know how much money's coming in, to know how much money's going out, and where that money's going out. But if you're living at home, you're not having to budget in the same way that you would if you were living on your own. When you have rent due, when you have utilities due, if you own a car and you're paying insurance on a car and you've got gas in order to get to and from work, if you've got to buy your own groceries and your own, household supplies, you now have to budget carefully, because if you don't make rent, guess what? You're going to get kicked out. But when you're living at home and your rent is taken care of, and oftentimes many other things are taken care of, you've got a cash flow where you feel like, oh, I can just buy stuff. I can just buy more video games, more video consoles. I can buy that fancy car. I can go on those fun, fancy trips. And you become the Matthew McConaughey in Failure to Launch. He's living at home with his parents, living his best life, looks super successful, other than the fact that he is not responsible in the least.
So much of a guy maturing and becoming responsible ties into these very things. Like you said, living at home can allow for a guy to spend money that he otherwise wouldn't. And so living out on your own, yeah, your expenses are higher. You're not going to be saving as much. That's all good though, because that is where, it's just as important what a guy says no to as what he says yes to. And when you're living on your own, when you have expenses, you very quickly learn and practice what is important and what's not. What am I going to spend my money on? What am I not? And those are really important things for a guy to practice and understand at an early age.
Because if a man doesn't learn to budget, if he doesn't learn to manage his money when he's single, guess what happens when they get married? They don't know how to budget and they don't know where their money's going. You don't get married and automatically become an accountant overnight, suddenly studious with your money, disciplined with your money, have self-control with your money. And so men need to begin putting that into practice now. And one of the best ways to do it is to move out of your parents' house to learn to budget, because you are likely not learning to budget by living with your parents.
And a guy has the rest of his life, presumably, to earn money. This isn't you might have a low income now. The goal is to increase that. But it's not like the next 2 years. I'm not going to retire in the next 5 years. Guys need to have this long-term perspective, this slow and steady. It's this Dave Ramsey approach of, you're not going to get rich overnight. You're not going to become financially independent. You're not going to retire, a couple of years from now. And I think men have lost this sense of, I'm in this for the long haul. I'm gonna work for decades. I'm gonna be financially responsible. And it's this slow and steady march toward better financial habits.
Another reason why men will end up living at home is because of their parents coddling them and really creating an environment that is conducive to the men staying at home and never leaving. Now, I'm not a parent, but you are, and you've got teenage daughters now. They're a few years away from adulthood. From your perspective as a parent, talk to me about the challenges of wanting to love your children, care for them, provide opportunity for them, but not coddling them and, just encouraging them to go out rather than just to always stay home.
And that is one of the hardest things that a parent will need to face. The more successful that parents are and the greater blessing that they raise their children in, the bigger the challenge is to not coddle them. And that is a very real thing, regardless of your income. What young guys need to realize is when they are raised with the blessing of their parents, under the blessing of their parents, that's a great thing. But there's a level of comfort that can grow, and there can be this a rut that they get in almost, this lack of desire to move out on their own, simply because there are so many things afforded to them. And as a parent, that is top of mind as my kids get older. How can I not coddle them? And, I was out a couple of years ago with my father-in-law, and we were chopping down a bunch of trees. We're clearing out this big area, and there's this one area that I wanted to move into, and there's a bunch of trees that I wanted to cut down. And he's like, we can't cut those down because if we cut those trees down, there are several other trees nearby that won't survive. And at first pass, these trees all looked pretty similar, but I'm not out in the woods as much as he is. And what he was saying was that these trees, smaller trees, had grown up under the protection of these other trees surrounding them. And if you take that away, these trees actually weren't weathered and strong enough to survive on their own. And he was able to recognize that. And I think, that was like, wow, there's a parenting parallel there. We can surround our kids, we can protect them, we can provide for them with good intention.
Sure.
But it's not actually getting them to the place where when they go out into the world, they're actually going to be successful.
There was a 2024 study done of parental care and overprotection, and they found that higher levels of overprotection resulted in more worry and anxiety, reduced self-regulatory capacity, and lower life satisfaction in adults coming of age. So one of the things that we can see, clinically, is that overprotection is not producing healthier adults. It's not producing more successful adults. That coddling actually is hindering this next generation, but particularly men. It hinders men because masculinity thrives under pressure and weight. Men were designed to carry weight and to walk through pressure. And so if their life is one of living in mom and dad's house where there's that protection, there's that oversight, there's that guarding, there's the benefit of house, home, finances, and security all available to them at their fingertips, then they're not walking through life bearing weight and walking through pressure.
And the challenge for young guys is that a very good case could be made for living at home. And I think that's the sneaky part. Every guy that lives at home that I've talked to has on the surface, a compelling reason for why they're there. And I think that's the danger. You can come up with plausible sounding reasons with a good case on why living at home is actually a good thing. But I would argue those perceived upsides to living at home aren't actually as big of upsides when compared to what you're giving up by not moving out.
And one of the other things that we see with men who live at home, the reason why they might stay at home is because it's just the comfort and ease that it provides them. Kind of going back to the financial, point, and then the parents coddling them. They are living at home. Most of the time, it's rent-free or a very, very low rent amount. And parents are buying food, parents are buying household supplies, parents are paying the utilities. It's not uncommon parents are paying for the cell phone bill. It's not uncommon that parents might even be paying for car insurance. So you've got this man who's living at home, and essentially his only financial responsibility is maybe gas, maybe his clothes, maybe if he has a car loan. And so all the other money that he has, he can just spend in whatever way he wants without concern because he has a safety net there. It's also very easy to stay home because you've got a place to invite friends over to. Yes, there's the inconvenience sometimes of they can't stay up super late because, you know, you've got siblings and parents. But you've got a home environment that's already curated for you by your mom, by your parents. So you can invite people into a cozy home, and guess what? You can invite them over for a home-cooked meal. You don't even need to know how to cook. You can literally be that classic bachelor who doesn't know how to take care of a home, doesn't know how to cook, doesn't know how to make a homey environment, and you can invite people over, and instantly it's available for them.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of guys have to reckon with. The more successful their parents were at parenting them, you could say, the more cozy the home environment, the more inviting, the better the home cooked meals. You know, there's so many things that keep us interested in home for good reason. And the better that that's represented, the harder it's going to be to actually leave from that.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have a good, healthy home environment, it's like, yeah, I'm going to move out because that's, what I have here is bad. That's not what we're talking about. But when a guy is faced with, wow, my home life is very interesting, it's inviting, it's a great space, my parents did a great job creating this, it's somewhere that I like to be, that's a good thing, but guys need to understand that it's just that much harder to eventually make the decision, as good as all this is, it's better for me to move out.
That's a great point, because for parents who are, you know, successful at parenting, particularly mothers who work hard to create a home environment that is loving, welcoming, and calm, if successful in that, the end result is the man doesn't want to leave the home. Because it is welcoming, it is loving, it is, you know, cozy and warm. But men need to leave the house. Doesn't mean that they're rejecting the family, doesn't mean it needs to be this big dysfunctional thing, but it is important for a man to leave his father and mother. Even if it's not straight into marriage, there's real value in that for men.
Comfort is a very dangerous thing. And while it's not a problematic pursuit, when comfort becomes the deciding factor in a man's life, that's where you run into big problems. And I think just to what you were saying, when a guy doesn't leave because there's comfort, because it's a cozy, inviting environment, when those are the reasons, that's where it becomes very problematic. And, you know, some people would say, well, okay, so I move out on my own. Is that the alternative? For young men moving out of the house, the best situation that I would recommend would be moving somewhere with roommates. Very little of life, if you end up married, is ever lived alone. And this idea of engaging with other people on a regular basis on like the nitty gritty, the day in, the day out, something that's outside of a professional business environment, those are all important interactions. And I think, you know, the work from home thing has been problematic on several levels. All that to say, a guy learning to live life with people is only going to serve him well when it comes to the day where he has to live life with a spouse.
One of the things that's nice about moving in with roommates is there's a lot of life lessons that you're going to learn real quick. Things like, which roommates should I be picking to live with me? People I know, people I don't know, people I've met, people I've never met. You know, am I picking people based upon common worldviews? You know, same religion, same values? Am I picking people that are the same gender? There's a lot of questions there. And then you've got to navigate the tensions of living with roommates. We've all heard the horror stories of, you know, the roommate who doesn't clean up after themselves, you know, kitchen's a mess, bathroom's a mess, living room's a mess, bedroom's a mess, whatever. And the tensions of having to relationally work through the dysfunction or brokenness or just unique habits that people have. That's so good because you can speak to this from experience. If you ever get married, you're going to have to work through things with your wife with regard to not just your behavior, but also hers.
Yeah. And on top of that, not only is it healthy for a guy to live life in close proximity to other people, it's actually dangerous for a guy to live on his own. There's very little upside that comes from a guy who day in and day out doesn't have to answer to anybody or doesn't have to compromise or navigate life. When you're out on your own, the decisions you make, where you go in life, it's all more or less based on what you want to do and where you want to go. And that for a guy, like guys just don't make good decisions on their own. We just don't. We need other men in our lives. We need mentors. We need accountability.
Sure.
We've talked about all that. And an easy way to do that is to to live life with other guys. If you're moving out of the house, move in with a bunch of other guys, and you'll quickly learn that it's actually going to be healthier. As annoying as it is, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be bothersome, it's going to be tiring, it's going to be all the things. But you're actually going to become a better man in that season that's going to set you up for greater success should you be married someday.
Not to say that men can't live on their own. You know, I lived alone for 10 years, but the key there is that I lived intentionally in community. I was almost never home.
Right.
It was more of a place that I slept and showered and stored stuff at than a place that I resided, because I was constantly in other people's homes. I was constantly in community. I was constantly in relationship with others.
And that is the key, and that's the key point. Yeah, I mean, your place was on some level a hotel room.
Yeah.
As it should be. It should be a great place to be. But yeah, you're not, video gaming or hobbies or just, watching movies at length. Men, if they don't have a demand put on them, a lot of guys don't naturally lean into demanding environments. And so, yeah, if a guy's gonna live on his own, okay, you can do that. Just have a plan, have some structure, know what the pitfalls are, know what the challenges are, and it can be done successfully.
Now, depending upon the age of the man, right? If we're talking 18 to 24, 25 in that range, I would actually encourage them to find a family in their local church that would be willing to let them move in. I know that after I graduated high school, I moved out of my parents' home, but then I moved into my pastor's family's house. And, I was best friends with his son growing up. We were super close all throughout college. And there was several of us all the same age living together in that house. And I ended up living there for 9 years. So well into kind of my late 20s almost. And it was such a blessing. And a lot of the things that we talked about for why men stay at home, I actually was the recipient of by living with my pastor and his family. And I'm so grateful that they opened their home to me. It actually helped me in so many ways, not just financially as I was going through college and then post-college, but really relationally. And the example that they set with regard to home life and just marriage and children and things like that was great to see that example.
Yeah.
So if a young man maybe is concerned about the responsibility of living on his own at 18, 20, 22, 24, another option is look to see if there's a family in your local church that will bring you in as part of their family. Now, as you get older, into your late 20s, into your 30s, it's possible that that's not a good setup for you or for another family. It's also possible that it might not be a great setup for you to try to find roommates, because the more successful you become as a man in your life, in your career, the harder it can be to find other men that can match that season of life you're in. And so you might find yourself in your late 20s and your 30s living alone, which again, rock it out, do it. But like you said, the key is stay invested in community. Make sure authority and accountability are speaking to your life. Don't make living alone all about you. Leverage your freedom, flexibility, time, resources, and singleness to bless and serve others.
And that is the key point there. A young guy who's like, yeah, I'm going to move out, but I want to live with a family, or this family has offered to take me in. That young guy's orientation should be, when my time here is up, this family should feel the deficit. They should feel the lack. Meaning, I'm going to contribute so much. I'm going to help out. I'm going to make their life better. I'm going to bear weight. I'm going to create shade for this family. I'm going to do that so where when the day comes when I'm not here anymore, they they really miss that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are reasons, good reasons, for men to stay at home, for men to live with their parents. And I think we need to unpack some of these ideas briefly, because it could sound like we are just really down on any man who is currently living with his parents. And we're not. And so the first thing that comes to mind when I think about a compelling reason why a man might live with his parents is because he's going to school. He's going to college, locally or online. And so it makes sense for him to live at home. Like, why spend the extra money to live on campus or get an apartment when you can live at home with your family? That makes sense. But what's important with any man who's going to live at home after he graduates high school, there needs to be purpose behind it, and there needs to be a timeline behind it. So there needs to, it's not just indefinitely, I'm living here until such a point as the wind changes and now I want to move out.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for a time. I'm here for a reason.
Yes, two things toward that end. The timeline is critical. It should be known it's for this amount of time. That should be known ahead of time.
And you can reevaluate when you get to that timeline.
Yes.
It's not like it's a final timeline, now you're out.
This isn't, set in stone, 10 commandments. You certainly can reevaluate, but a guy should know ahead of time, my plan is to be at home for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, let it be known. And the second important point is that it is communicated. When a guy is living at home, it is very important that he communicates his plan with his parents. The length of time, this is how long I plan to be at home, this is why, and this is what I expect the plan to be after.
Another reason that a man might stay home is because of medical reasons, right? Maybe he's helping to take care of his parents, or maybe he himself had an injury of some kind, or maybe he's walking through some mental health concerns. So there's value in him being home during that season. But again, there's a purpose behind it, and hopefully, depending upon what the medical condition is, there's a finite timeline of saying, well, I'm going to be better in 6 weeks, 6 months, 1 year, however long it takes.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe the point we should drive home. There should always be a known end date in the plan.
Sure.
Again, it can change, but guys living at home should always have an expected end date. Whether that's next week or in 6 years. I might argue 6 years is too long, but at least it should be known.
Yeah.
And if that time comes, you need to reevaluate, okay, but don't just have it be open-ended. Always have a known end date.
Now, sometimes a reason a man will stay home is because he's working towards something very specific, like he's getting certified to, certified in something. Maybe he's going to become like a linesman, or maybe he's going to, become an HVAC guy. And so he's going through like a certification process. So it's kind of like school, but it's shorter, and he wants to get that under his belt. Then he wants to begin working to begin making good money before he moves out. That makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, again, there's a purpose behind it. Or he might actually be saving up for a down payment on a house, on a place of his own. And so he sits down with his parents and says, hey, I hope to move out in 6 months or a year or 2 years, but I'm going to be putting away money in an effort to be able to put a good down payment on a place of my own.
And again, with that mindset, very important that it is communicated. And I would even say it would be good practice for the young guy to communicate that with other people.
Sure.
If it's a down payment, okay, is that going to be 10%, 12%? Are you going to save up for 15%? Let that be known, and check in as you approach that, because again, what happens, guys can be sneaky, and first it's 10%, and then it's like, well, 12% is probably better, and we don't tell anybody, and we've hit the 12%, and we're like, oh, well, you know what, I'll just delay it a little longer.
Yep.
I'll just keep working. This is working out well. I'm earning good money. I'm able to save, and guys can get into this kind of quiet routine where no one else really knows what's going on. Things seem to be working from the outside. And so without communication, this is the plan, that really can enable a guy to ease into this pattern of life that's comfortable and hard to eventually move out of.
I'm thinking about things like hardships and crises as reasons why a man might stay home. There are all kinds of life circumstances and events that might trigger an immediate reason for why he needs to be living with his parents for a season. I also think about, maybe the Lord has called a man for a very specific reason to stay at home with his family. Again, you want to be obedient to the Lord. I think the key thing, though, is no matter what your reason is for staying home, you need to be able to articulate the purpose behind it.
Yes.
And you need to be able to communicate the duration for how long you believe that time period is. Again, it's not a finite, set in stone, never to be changed date, but it's I think for the next year, I'm going to be here. Yep. And here's the reason why I think I'm going to be here. To fall into just the habitual habit of existing at your parents' house and, 25, 30, 35, 40 comes and you're just still living with your parents, that is unhealthy for you. That's unhelpful for you. And you're actually not setting yourself up for success, especially if you want to be married.
It's true. There is little that's less attractive to a woman than a guy living at home. And that's just a trade-off. If a guy's gonna live at home and he has good reason and other people can buy into that, okay, that's the season you're in. Just know the reality is women will look at that as unattractive.
Yes, because women view independence as a form of competence. A man who is unable to live on his own likely isn't competent enough to care for a wife. And so any man who is interested in being married needs to demonstrate to a woman, hey, I can take care of you. I do have the ability to be independent. I'm not dependent upon my mom and my dad taking care of me. I'm not dependent upon my mom making my bed, cleaning my room, and making me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I have that ability to do that myself.
And moving out on your own, much like every other area, you talk to people who are into filmmaking, or you talk to people who start businesses. If you talk to anybody who attempts something new, everyone will tell you, there's so much I've learned, there were so many curveballs, and there's a lot to figure out. And living life is a lot like that. Yeah. There's a lot to figure out. There's a lot you don't know. There are a lot of curveballs. And that's not something that a guy should plan on doing as he's moving toward marriage at the same time. Ideally, all the difficulty, all the challenges, all the nuance of moving out, figuring out life, it's healthy for a guy to figure that out on his own. Have that be more muscle memory. Have that be, okay, I got this figured out. I know how to do this. I can navigate this. And then once all that is kind of, behind you, you're in a much better place to start pursuing somebody.
And for a lot of women, they're looking for a man who will provide for them in some way, shape, or form. And provision really is a form of initiation. If you can't initiate taking care of yourself, getting a home for yourself, a place to live, initiate getting a job, initiate budgeting.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a lot of confidence that you can provide for her.
Yeah.
Because you haven't demonstrated that you're one who initiates.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. In parenting, there's this idea that you're there for your kids, you're kind of just spending. My time, my energy is to my kids. And while there's some truth to that, you're not going to be a healthy parent if you're not first taking care of yourself. And that can be, you got to be careful with that.
For sure.
But parents parent well out of their overflow, so to speak. You're not going to parent well if you yourself aren't doing well. And I think to a relationship, it's the same thing. A guy isn't going to lead well. He's not going to engage with a spouse well if he hasn't figured out life. If he's struggling to make life happen on his own, he's not going to be able to bring strength into a relationship.
Yes. And I think that something that is oftentimes missed in the discussion of men living at home when it comes to romantic relationship is no woman wants to compete with a man's mother. I think of the classic, Howard from Big Bang Theory situation. He lives with his mother. he falls in love with Bernadette, and then very much so, treats Bernadette, his girlfriend, like he does his mother. And so his expectation is she's going to cook for him and do his laundry and take him to the dentist and all these things. And in the show, it's funny, but it's actually super cringy because it actually represents what a lot of men think a wife should be for them.
Yeah.
And a woman who's worth her salt is not going to want to be in a relationship with a man who's looking to be mothered.
Yes. Now, a guy, and moms play this interesting role where a healthy mother should influence what a guy looks for, broadly speaking, in a wife. A guy is not looking for a replacement. A young guy shouldn't be looking for, hey, my wife should do this because my mom did this.
Sure.
Use your mom as this.
The values and maybe characteristics, right?
Yes, right. Use those to say, okay, this is the type of woman I am interested in, or these are the characteristics in a woman I would want. But absolutely, a guy should never use his mom as the template for what he expects from his wife.
Because no woman wants to be the mother of her husband. She's looking for a man who will lead, who will provide, who will protect, who will take initiative. She's not looking for a man that she's got to clean up after, that she's got to wake up in the morning, that she's got to put to bed, that she's got to kiss his boo-boos and tell him everything's all right. And so many men who live with their parents well into their 20s and 30s are the men who are looking for a woman who's like their mother, who's going to tell them it's okay and make them their special meal, for dinner and give them that nice warm glass of milk before they go to bed and tuck them in and kiss them on the forehead and pray over them. That's not what women are looking for. And so men need to recognize that the longer they live with their parents, the more likely they are reducing the opportunities to be in a romantic relationship.
And men hopefully recognize that that's not even her role to make life easier for you. As a guy, the role of partnering with somebody, if you bring a wife into your life, her role isn't just, hey, make sure the meals are there, make sure my bed is made, make sure my laundry is done.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, that is just completely backwards.
Yes.
And so a guy needs to understand, fully understand why he's here and what his role is.
And it doesn't mean that you can't be living with your parents and then from there move into marriage. And particularly on the younger side, the younger you are, the more likely that is to happen, right? If you're 18, 20, 22, 24, and you're living with your parents, it's much more likely that you will find a woman who might be attracted to you at that stage of life and be okay with you living with your parents just simply because of where you're at in life in that moment. But you start to get to 26, 28, 30, 35, 40, and it's going to be very, very hard.
Huge hurdle for a lot of women to clear.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
And so men need to stop delaying moving out of their parents' house because they don't want to face the unknown, or they don't want to face the tension or all the work that's required for them to figure out life on their own. But it is going to help produce in them a maturity and an ability, a wherewithal, an intentionality that is going to be very attractive to women versus the man who just sits at home, plays video games all day, and expects his mom to bring him, Hot Pockets.
Yeah, I mean, that is the simple reality that men living at home, just in general, will be less attractive to women. Now, wanting to move out to appear more attractive to women, great reason. I fully endorse that. There are a lot of other good reasons to move out. Responsibility builds confidence. We need more confident men. And that really comes through living life, figuring out life, being faced with challenges, being faced with problems, figuring all that out. That's going to build a guy's confidence. And we're talking about real confidence, not this fake, I got it together, I'm cool. There can be an arrogance or just a cheap confidence. But a real, true confidence in life and being able to handle problems that come at you, that is very important.
And by moving out, one of the things that men experience are struggles. And it's through struggling in life that men are actually going to realize that they have the strength to overcome those obstacles, those struggles. A lot of men today, because they've been coddled, because they've been protected, they're a fragile being now, unfortunately. And so the idea of being yelled at by a landlord because you missed a payment, or the idea of, having to get a second job and work long days, which sounds nearly impossible to every Gen Z person right now. The idea of having to budget and actually not spend money on all the things you want. That might seem impossible while you're living in your parents' basement watching, TV late into the night. But guess what? You are strong enough to navigate those moments and to be successful. And that's also what helps lead men to be confident, is because when they overcome struggles, when they overcome obstacles and realize, oh, I can do this, it gives you a sense of confidence that, like, I can navigate life. Life is hard, but it's not going to overcome me.
And another great reason why a guy would move out is this idea of a rite of passage. There aren't many moments in a guy's life that can be a marker toward maturity. And if the day comes where he's pursuing a woman or married, by definition, you're out living on your own. But walking through that ahead of time, going through that season of life, is really this, like, almost this point of no return. It reorients how you think. It reorients how you approach life. It can reprioritize what's important. And those are all really healthy, good things for a man to wrestle with before he considers a relationship.
And for all men, they have to, at some point, deal with this reality of, when am I moving out? For some, it's easy because they go off to college in a place that's not near home, so they move out after graduating high school. Then they end up taking a job either in that area or in a completely different area. And so they're kind of forced into that trajectory of moving out of mom and dad's house. But there's an entire group of other men in our culture who, for whatever reason, are still living with their parents. And so at some point, whether it's today, next year, or 10 years from now, you are going to have to make the decision on when you're going to move out. And so it's better to not delay, but today begin to process, why am I here and how long should I stay?
Now, there are a lot of good reasons for a guy to move out. One that is problematic is if he decides to move out because he is interested in a girl. Women can be and should be motivators. That's kind of how they were designed. And men respond to female influence.
Sure.
That's a great thing. But if a guy is interested in a particular woman and he's still living at home, my advice to him would be move out for a season, figure out life, and then pursue her.
I do think there is something to be said for having a track record, because men will oftentimes pivot very quickly in order to get something that they want. And this is why it's so important to have a brotherhood in your life, to have authority and accountability checking in to make sure that you are being faithful for a season, to make sure that you are being diligent and that you do have self-control. And I think that, if this guy moves out of his parents' home because he wants to pursue Sally, 2 weeks after moving out of his parents' home, he sits down with Sally and says, hey, I'm interested in romantically pursuing you. Can I date you? I think it's actually really good for the woman to check in on his track record. And so she can ask a question of, like, if she doesn't already know, hey, do you have, like, your own place? And if he says yes, a great follow-up question would be, well, how long have you lived there? And if he says 2 weeks, then she can ask, well, where did you live before that? Well, I lived with my parents. Well, why did you live with your parents? And he can explain why he lived with his parents. And she can find out whether, his mommy and daddy were, like, taking care of him and tucking him in bed at night and giving him a warm cup of milk. Because I think that a man who has to, confess to a woman he's interested in that, oh, yeah, my parents have been taking care of me for the last 25 years, that's going to be a motivating factor where he wants to avoid that conversation and that embarrassment to hopefully move out well before he ever wants to pursue Sally. But if he moves out because he wants to pursue Sally, I'm like, hey, I'm glad you moved out. At least you did something good, which is moving out so that you can step into a season of responsibility and growth and strength.
Yes. Now, maybe not 2 weeks. Give us some time. And I would hope that the woman would have the wherewithal, the maturity, the curiosity to ask those questions.
Sure.
That would be great. Very healthy. Not all women would, and it does put it puts an increased burden of responsibility on her to ask these questions, to kind of, piece this together and figure it out, which is fine. But my advice for a guy would be, do what you can to not make the woman need to do those things. And hopefully she does, and she can do them anyway. But a guy should hopefully orient his life in a way where those questions are an easy answer or even not needed.
Sure, ideally a man has already made decisions in his life. He's already walked things out in a way where when it comes time to want to pursue a woman, he's been faithful to live on his own and to budget and to have self-control and to be responsible and to walk in purity, all those things. Hopefully all of those are at play. But one of the things that we do know is that women are a motivating factor for men to do a lot of good things that they otherwise might not do.
Yes, and there's a little bit of nuance in the women are motivators. They just categorically are, and that's by design. But we know that women can motivate men in unhealthy ways.
Of course.
And so my concern is that starts to sneak in this area. If a guy is at home and immediately decides to move out for a specific woman, in order to look more interesting to her, to be more attractive to her, the problem I see there is that it's yes, it gets him out of the house, and yes, that's a good thing, but he's doing it simply to keep her around. And I think when a guy makes decisions, when a guy has patterns in his life, and he does things simply to keep the woman around, I don't see good fruit there.
Of course. And I think that, we could probably do an entire episode on external motivation for men, particularly when it comes to women. And where is the line of good versus bad when it comes to women being an external motivator for men? I tend to land in, if a woman's presence is causing him to make healthy choices, even for the wrong reasons, I'm pro it. And so the takeaway, I think, here is we want men to listen to all the things we talked about with, considering why they're living at home or why they're moving out, and not to pivot towards any one moment or any one woman, but to holistically look at this and say, yeah, as a man who wants to walk in maturity and responsibility, who wants to walk in experience and intentionality, I'm going to move out. I think if a man is examining his life through that lens, where he's going to land, whether it's in pursuit of a woman within 6 months, 6 weeks, or 6 years, is going to put him in a much healthier position than if he just stays at home and never decides to move out. So gentlemen, we've covered a lot of things here today. And if you're a man who's already moved out of your parents' household, well, today's conversation really isn't for you, and there's nothing you need to do. However, if you're a man who's living with your parents, we're not here to tell you that's wrong or bad. However, we do want to encourage you to evaluate the purpose behind why you're living with them. You need to be able to articulate the reasons that you're living at home. And you need to be able to identify a timeline by which you're going to reevaluate your stay with them, because you don't want 5, 10, 20 years to pass and for you to still be that single guy living at home with your parents while everyone else is out living their best life. As a man, you should be ready to step into the unknown, to lean into your masculinity and find that you actually do have the strength to overcome the unknown obstacles that you're going to face by moving out of your parents' household. And trust me, if you do that, you will find not only a confidence that you'll be able to walk in, but you will become more attractive to the women around you. As always, we love having you here on the Ardent Pursuit podcast, and we look forward to having you here next time.